To see what you could see. That's about it.
You remember that, right?
60-something years.
Yes. I mean, it's at least some of it is still embedded in the brain. Now, I got chastised by the 8 o'clockers for my singing, but that, it's a beautiful little song, and we all remember that story. It's one of the first Bible stories that I remember in Sunday school as a kid. It's a fascinating story. It's very simple and straightforward, but there's something about it that bothers me, and we'll get to that. So, you may remember early in the summer, we started in Luke's Gospel, on Jesus' journey to Jerusalem with the disciples. So all these past few weeks, he's been on this journey. He set his face toward Jerusalem, and he's heading there for the final days of his ministry. And he's coming through Jericho, which is a border town, and he's passing through, and this is what happens. So he's heading toward the final days of his ministry on earth, and what is Jesus' ministry? He summarizes it here in Luke 19, verse 10. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. The lost who need to be saved in God. Also the outcast, the marginalized, the forgotten, the hated, the sinners. A man there was named Zacchaeus, and Luke explains that he was a chief tax collector. Now, when you hear those words, what do you think?
Not a nice person.
Yeah, they were the same way there. He was not well liked at all. Tax collectors, of course, were despised because they were Jewish men who worked for the hated empire of Rome. They collected the taxes and they sent them on to Rome. And so people thought they were betraying their own people. And not only was Zacchaeus a tax collector, but he was the chief tax collector. And tax collectors were also hated because they often would skim off the top or charge extra so that they could line their own pockets and get rich off the people. So, not very well liked. And not only that, but he says was rich, which is all the more reason to hate this guy. Because tax collectors were so notorious for taking extra money and enriching themselves off the people, it would be kind of like a Wells Fargo president for us today. So Zacchaeus was trying to see who Jesus was, Luke says. It's interesting that Luke doesn't say he was trying to see Jesus, but who Jesus was. He'd obviously heard about this Jesus, heard about maybe some of his teachings and his miracles, and just wanted to know what's he all about. But he was frustrated, and the crowd was not doing him any favors, this tax collector, to get out of his way so that he could see. And on top of that, he was short in stature. I pictured Danny DeVito in this role. So what does he do? He runs ahead and he climbs up the sycamore tree to see Jesus as he passed by. And Jesus gets there, he looks up and he calls him and says to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. Now, Jesus calls him by name. Did he know him already? It doesn't sound like it, since Zacchaeus is trying to figure out who Jesus was. So did somebody tell Jesus about this creep? Zacchaeus, watch out for him. He's one of those tax collectors. Well, we don't know. But Jesus was adamant. He had to be with Zacchaeus, to spend time with him, even enjoy his company. Zach's company. People must have been stunned by this decision, but Jesus always does outrageous things. Of course, Zach hurries down the tree and is happy to welcome Jesus to his home, and people are left grumbling. He has gone to be the guest of one who is a sinner. Doesn't Jesus know who this little pipsqueak is? This rich tax collector? It's disgusting. Well, Zach and Jesus must have heard the crowds grumbling, But before Jesus can say anything, Zach stands there and blurts out, "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I will give to the poor. And if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." And Jesus says to him, "Today salvation has come to this house." The end. Zacchaeus repents and promises to be generous. He says he will give half what he has to the poor and pay back 4 times if he's defrauded anyone. Hallelujah. But here's the thing that bugs me about this story. The New Revised Standard Version of the Bible that we heard read says Zach will give half of his possessions to the poor and will pay back 4 times as much, indicating that suddenly he has had a changed heart and life and pledges to change his way. That's the way the NRSV is, and the NIV. But in the original Greek, it's not the future tense, it's the present tense. And that's what the King James Version has and the Revised Standard Version. So maybe Zacchaeus is really responding to the grumbling of the crowds defending himself. "Look, half of my possessions, Lord, I give to the poor. And if I cheat anyone of anything, I give back 4 times as much." In the present tense, it sounds a lot more like he's defending himself from the charges of being an awful, sinning, greedy tax collector cheat. He's a giver, more than a tither. Keep that in mind as you fill out your pledge card. In fact, Zacchaeus is declaring that he fulfills one of the technical laws in the book of Exodus, which says if you defraud anyone of anything, you have to pay back 4 times as much. So he's fulfilling the law of God. So it sounds generous, what he's saying there, but that is the law for those who have cheated. And Zach doesn't even really admit that he's cheated anyone. He says, if I've defrauded anyone, not when. So maybe Zach was a good, generous man who was being stereotyped because of his position. So what's going on here? Did Zacchaeus have a sudden change of heart because of Jesus? Or is he defending himself, standing up for himself against the crowd's grumbling? Well, here's the thing about Jesus. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are. If you look at it carefully, Zach's not confessing sin or repenting. Jesus doesn't commend Zach's penitence or faith. He simply pronounces blessing on him. Once again, Jesus does the outrageous and the unexpected. And no matter who Zacchaeus was, Jesus wants to be with him. He declares that salvation has come to this house. Zacchaeus is already a part of the family of God. He is a son of Abraham. Now, why is Jesus this way? Because the Son of Man has come to seek and save the lost. Jesus sought out Zacchaeus, calling him by name, inviting himself into his own home and his heart. Zacchaeus was as lost as anyone. He was no better and no worse. But Jesus sought him out, loved him, and declared him saved. And the truth is, from the beginning of the Gospel of Luke, and throughout the whole Gospel, Jesus sides with those who are outcast and rejected, those on the margins, the down and out, those who are not counted as much in the world's eyes. Yes, Zacchaeus is rich, but he is despised by his neighbors, looked down on, literally and figuratively, because of who he was. Yet Jesus singles him out and stays with him and blesses him. Jesus declares for all to hear that this guy, even this chief tax collector, is a child of Abraham, a son of God. And Jesus is once again seeking out those who are lost, whether through their own actions or as a result of the actions of others, in order to find and save and restore them. The point is that Zacchaeus embodies the promise that anyone who desires to see Jesus will see Jesus. And more than that, anyone who desires to see Jesus will in turn be seen by Jesus and therefore have their joy made complete. There's a lovely little poem by Steve Garnos Holmes that captures this. Like two old friends, God and the sinner. Here's the scandal. The beloved actually, really wants to be with you. Imagine that. The loving one sees you in your awkwardness, uncomfortably hanging on in your ridiculous perch, knows all about the gossip, and still can think of nothing more desirable than being with you. At your place, on your terms. It's this simple. The Holy One wants to be with you. No condescension. It's no job requirement. God likes being with you. God likes being with you. God likes being with you. So Zacchaeus, regardless of those verb tenses, embodies one who is generous in his dealings with the poor. He serves others with what he has, and Jesus celebrates him for that. Zacchaeus was a steward doing his duty as a child of God. And we see in the lives of generous souls all around us, many of them here, the joyful and abounding love for God expressed through generosity and service for others. It's what happens when you love God. So, like Zacchaeus, let's be faithful stewards who take what we're given and share with others by giving to our beloved St. Gabriel's and its ministries and in many other ways. That's the kind of faith that Jesus celebrates. And no matter how tall you are, that's how you see Jesus. Amen.
Amen.